In the last couple of videos, we've looked at how parents tend to blame themselves. We looked at the idea of blaming yourself because you were a bad parent. We looked at the idea of blaming yourself because bad choices in the if-onlys. Today, I'd like to continue with that theme by looking at self-blame in the lines of bad genes or genetic inheritance. Parents blame themselves for having an addictive family history, or they blame each other. In my time counseling couples, I can't even begin to tell you how often I've heard one spouse blame the other spouse for things outside the spouse's control, like addiction runs in your family, or you must have addictive genes. Well, let's take a look at what is this addictive gene theory, shall we? The theory of having an addictive gene actually began when the disease model was failing. The disease model, as we'll talk about in a different video, has been around for 130 years now, and we've learned a lot since it was originally put forth. So many of these discoveries actually were destroying the disease theory, or the disease model. So one of the discoveries that we came across was genes, genetics. And that seemed to support the disease theory at first. But then we discovered how much of a role the environment has with our genes and interacts with them. And that spelled doom for the disease theory. So what happened was a group of researchers got together and started really looking at the genetics theory. And they came up with the idea that some people are born with addictive genes and some are not. Now, you have to understand that for a geneticist, genes are very deterministic. If you have this gene, this is what's going to happen. You have basically no free will. So they came up with the idea that if you have the addictive gene, you're going to become addicted, no free will. And if you do not have the addictive gene, nothing you can do is going to result in you becoming addicted. Well, how would you test that theory if that was your theory? Most people, myself included, would say, well, if that's the case, then we should reasonably expect to see identical twins who are always, or even 90 to 95%, almost always, both addicted or both non-addicted. After all, identical twins do share the same genes, right? Well, they ran into a problem. What they discovered is that both twins being addicted, both twins being addicted or not addicted, happened in less than 40% of the cases. In other words, more than half, more than 60% of the cases, one was addicted and one was not. Now, most people would have said, well, the evidence does not support my theory. Maybe I need to go back and take a look at my theory and scrap it or come up with a new theory, right? Not researchers. Thing you need to know about a researcher is almost all researchers, if they have a pet theory, have a very hard time following the evidence. They more want to make the evidence fit the theory. Make sense? So that is what our researchers did. What they came up with was the idea that some people are born with the addictive gene and some people are not. Those without the addictive gene can never become addicted. Those with the addicted gene can only become addicted if the environment turns on the light switch to activate that gene. If the environment does not turn on that light switch, then they cannot become addicted. Now, one of the things that's going to automatically come to most people's minds is if they're identical twins, their home environment's the same, their school environment's probably the same, they probably went to the same classes together, a lot of their environment is going to be the same. And that's going to become important later on when we talk about where the idea of blaming the parents actually came from. But for now, just file it away in the back of your mind. One of the problems with the epigenetics theory is, yes, genes do play a major role in how we look, how tall we are, how big our nose is, what our facial features look like, our hands, all of that. It does play a role in that. But it does not play a role in behavior. Behavior is the result of a series of different elements interacting together, not dictated by one or two genes. If it was, if we had an addictive gene, if our behavior was dictated by one or two genes, or even several working together, then realistically, if we have an addictive gene, we should also have a scuba diving gene, a basketball player gene, a airplane flying gene, a parachuting gene. We don't. We don't have those because genes do not dictate behavior. Make sense? Maybe this example will help. I used to raise bees. All female bees are born to be workers. All female worker bees share the same genetic makeup. They have the same genes. One of the female worker bees, though, is selected to become queen. The other worker bees help her to become queen by changing her environment. They make her cell bigger. They feed her royal jelly and change her diet completely from the other worker bees. These changes allow her body to change from worker bee to queen bee. Make sense? Your addicted loved one is much more complex than one of the bees in my apiary. So how much is environment and how much is genetics? We don't know enough about genetics to be making wild guesses and accusations and theories like the epigenetics theory. We don't know if drugs do permanent damage to genes or not. We don't know if drugs change genes. If they do, we don't know, are the changes permanent or temporary? Can they be reversed or not? Can they be handed down, inherited through the future generations? We don't know any of that. We certainly do not have enough evidence to justify you blaming yourself for giving your child addictive genes, and we certainly don't have enough evidence for you to blame your spouse for them giving your child addictive genes. We simply don't know. It's simply not enough. So my theory is, when it comes to the epigenetics theory, to quote Nancy Pelosi, come on, Apollo, let's go.